Hello, and welcome to another live Q&A episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Cody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we have our special guest, Alex Lin, here to answer hacking-related questions live in the chat, as well as answering some comments we've gotten on our YouTube videos. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And before we get started, per Zam recommending in the chat, and something I was already going to do, we did want to recommend something that's not a Q&A item, but definitely is news. If you have an iPhone, you should definitely update it. And in fact, if you have macOS, if you have any Apple product, you should update it immediately, because as of yesterday, there was a patch pushed out for a really serious zero-day vulnerability that was being actively exploited by NSO Group. Do you remember who they are?
Not entirely. You'll have to remind me.
So this group is basically a group that professes to sell spyware, essentially, to governments in order to allow them to track down like criminals and terrorists and stuff, but often is actually just found on the phones of activists. So this means that it's very likely that a group might buy the spyware and then use it on someone who hadn't done anything illegal, or really is able to just decide like what constitutes illegal in that country, and then go after human rights defenders or other people who really shouldn't be attacked with this level of sophisticated malware. So it's really important that anybody who has this this flaw still viable on their phone update this, because it's very likely now that the flaw has been made public that lots of other people are going to be trying to take a crack at exploiting this. So really, really big news in cybersecurity. Again, this goes back to what happens when a security researcher finds a vulnerability. Alex, if you were to find a security vulnerability in a really big platform like the iPhone, what would your options be for reporting that?
Usually, companies would have like some sort of program or like bug bounty thing where you could disclose that to them safely. So I would usually go through that route.
What if you wanted to make $10 million instead?
Probably sell it to some hackers or something.
There you go. So that's exactly what happened here. So NSA Group is basically either develops or buys exploits and weaponizes them for their customers. And their customers are also, you know, countries like Saudi Arabia or other places that maybe don't have excellent human rights records. So when these countries are willing to put up big bucks in order to get these zero-click kind of malware infection routes, it's really, really scary, because there's nothing for you to do wrong. Can you describe what a zero-click infection is when we're talking about 0 days?
It's just a piece of like arbitrary code that can run without needing any form of interaction from the user that it's meant to attack.
Right. So sometimes we'll be telling, journalists, for example, like how to keep themselves safe, and we'll say, oh, well, if you get a link from someone you don't recognize, and this is often the hallmark of like the second most expensive exploit that this group has, where the user or the victim in this case has to click on something in order to fall victim to the malware. So it usually means that there's like a web exploit or something else that requires at least one piece of interaction. So these one-click exploits are more common because they do require a bit more interaction from the user, but these zero-click mean that basically you just get infected if you get targeted, and there's really very little that's possible to do about that. So that's why this is so serious, is because this is basically like kind of almost like a mercenary group that's buying and selling cyber weapons to kind of sketchy actors. And now that this exploit is made public, rather than doing what Alex said the first time and disclosing this responsibly to Apple, they decided to weaponize it and sell it to some of the worst people. So that's why this is a very serious problem, because now that the vulnerability is out there, people know about it, it will be exploited by others, and if you do not update, then you probably could fall victim to it, because this is, again, a zero-click like zero-click, 0 day, where basically you don't need to do anything in order to be infected by this if your device is targeted. So the specifics of this we'll get into in the news stream. I just wanted to put that out there before we even get started. So if you have any questions about this, then feel free to ask us in the chat, and we'll try to talk about it a little bit if you have any like technical questions. But basically, this is like a GIF, effectively, that's a hidden type of other Adobe file, which happens to be able to cause an exploit in Apple devices. So really serious. This affects also Mac OS. It affects iWatches. So there are a lot of devices that are vulnerable to this. And if you have, for example, like an iWatch, you're going to want to update that too. So don't know if you heard about that, but kind of some sketchy business.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our first question today. And we're going to pull that up. And oh boy, it's kind of a long one. Alex, can you pull that up so I can see it, or perhaps read it?
Sure. Whoa. Wait.
I noticed in a lot of your videos have repeat questions. How do I get into ethical hacking? While there is a lot of content on this platform relating to that already, it sounds like the audience wants to hear your take on it. It might be worth making a video on this subject.
Yeah, so getting into ethical hacking is something we do get asked a lot. And of course, what we usually say is there's a lot of different fields here, so it really depends on what you're good at and what kind of stuff you want to spend your day doing. If you want to spend your day doing, incident response and you want to be on the front lines of companies that have recently been breached and try to solve the crime and figure out what's going on, then incident response sounds like a good field. If you want to be a defender on the day-to-day, then blue teaming seems like a good idea. If you want to be paid to break stuff and you like maybe working outside the rules a little bit, but still, are not going to go fully rogue, then maybe red teaming or bug bounties would be a good field. So it's such a broad subject that we probably should do an episode on it, but it's going to be a long episode and we would need to bring some people in, I think. So we can absolutely do that. I will also refer you to a video that we did about people from all different sorts of backgrounds on Hack5 getting into cybersecurity. Some of them were makeup artists, some of them were school teachers. It was really an interesting view on how other people found their own route into cybersecurity. So I would say like the breaking into cybersecurity video we did on Hack5 is probably a good introduction to how people get started in cybersecurity and might make you rethink some ways that you could get involved as well. But we'll definitely take a look at making a video more specifically on like career focused things. We just need to know what kind of careers you guys are interested in, because we could spend a whole episode on blue teaming, but if you meant, reverse engineering, then you might be a little bit disappointed. So I just want to make sure we answer your question well. And in this case, there's so many different parts of cybersecurity that's a little bit difficult to just specifically pick one. So let me take a look at the chat, and I think that, okay, how do you cook a lobster? You put it in hot water. Easy. Thank you, Omar. How to learn reverse engineering. Reverse engineering is probably one of the most technical and arguably one of the more challenging branches of cybersecurity to get into. Alex, what would reverse engineers do for a living?
They would take a look at a piece of hardware or software or something like that, and they would basically figure out how it works and, in essence, reconstruct like the underlying way that this object works and determine like how to recreate that or exploit it or something like that.
Yeah, so typically these are people that are working either, you could consider to be like a black box. So they have a piece of software or a piece of hardware and they don't know the way that it is running inside. Like they will typically have to figure out what the processes are and evade some pretty tricky things that malware authors introduce into their malware to prevent people from easily figuring out what it's supposed to do. Can you think of an example for like how malware authors might try to make it difficult for reverse engineers?
They could probably find ways to obfuscate their code or obfuscate payloads and stuff like that.
Yes, so payload obfuscation means a lot of stuff is going to be encoded or hidden, or it won't run unless certain checks are performed. So that means like a lot of malware will not run within a virtualized environment. It's so likely that it's a reverse engineer or somebody who's trying to figure out how it works that it just won't do that. So there's lots of challenges in getting into reverse engineering if that's what you want to get into. But I would say that arguably like the best skill to have when getting into reverse engineering would be computer science, and probably understanding computer science on a relatively low level where you're doing like C and C++ and you're not just sticking to things like Python and doing basic fun stuff. I am not wonderful at math, so this is something that does not particularly appeal to me, which is why after 2 years of computer science, I decided I liked networking and electronics a lot more. But if you are strong in math, then reverse engineering could be something that's really good for you, because if you like figuring out mysteries and you like math, then you could get paid a lot to unravel the way that some particularly nasty or clever malware works, which is really, really cool. So I would say if you want to get into reverse engineering, first check out Marcus Hutchkin's videos on getting started, because he shows how to use Ghidra and some other stuff that I think is a great way for anybody who's never started doing this to write their own very, very small program in like C or C++, compile it, and then reverse engineer it to see how tricky it is to take a look at something after it's been compiled and then figure out what was actually written originally. It's hard to find like the entry point to the program and some other logical things that you just wouldn't know if you didn't kind of look over someone's shoulder. So I highly recommend you check out Malware Tech's reverse engineering videos. I think they're really, really great. And if you like them, then a computer science background would probably help you a lot getting into reverse engineering.
We have a question from the chat. Is it possible to merge two SSDs together?
What? You can answer that one because I don't understand it. So is
I mean,
it
like,
possible to
copy
merge like
data?
two solid state drives together, like map them as the same drive? I'm sorry, I don't know that one.
I am not entirely sure how that works. But okay.
Yeah, we'll have to take another one. Yeah, sorry, we hear a shout from the forest, yes, but no further details. So unfortunately, we don't do SSD
We don't do
stuff.
computers around here.
No.
All right. Do you guys host a boot camp or suggest any boot camp? I'm currently am in the MSP field and have been exposed to CUI and DFARS, okay, networking, and have lots of experience, but could always learn more. So we have not taught classes since we stopped doing them in person at Null Space Labs, but there are some good boot camps out there. Personally, like, it depends, again, on what your goals are. If you want to get into cybersecurity and get your hands dirty and get a feel for it, there's definitely stuff that we do online. Like, we still are trying to do some like introduction to Wi-Fi hacking and other things that are really fun skills that anybody can learn and apply, but maybe are not, like, you're not going to get a job just learning how to hack Wi-Fi. You know, like, if you're looking for career skills versus like engagement skills and like core cybersecurity skills, like, it's kind of a little bit different. So something like Cybrary might be a good choice for like getting those core cybersecurity things that you're going to need to pass a certification. Because again, like, you're not going to pass. Learning how to hack Wi-Fi and passing an exam are totally different things. You know, you can learn and experiment and get pretty good at understanding how Wi-Fi works and how to break it, and you can pass the test. And those are, again, different goals. We more do this is how you can abuse, break, and mess with Wi-Fi. And we want people to understand that and learn and maybe get more interested and then go into the more technical stuff that would pass them on a certification. But we don't really like teach people towards the goal of getting a certification or teach some of the things that people would probably require you to know in order to get a certain kind of job in cybersecurity. So again, it kind of depends on where exactly you want to get into or which skills you want to buff. But I would recommend you check out, we have some Udemy classes that we do Wi-Fi hacking and human interface device attacks, which are really fun. And then we're going to try to do some more live, but we've taken a little bit of a pause because frankly, all the virtual conferences were just making it exhausting to do virtual classes.
It'd be fun to pick up classes again, though.
It would, yeah. So, I mean, if you guys are interested, we can definitely do some bootcamp style, couple hour classes where we go from complete beginner to being able to hack stuff to a pretty good degree. And we usually like include hardware and stuff with that. So it is a lot of fun. So thank you for asking. I appreciate that. All right, let's pick another question from the YouTube.
Cool. From Funky Monk. How did people get the algorithm that Apple will use in an upcoming iOS release? I don't think they have the exact algorithm, but they were able to create something similar. Oh, no, never mind.
Yeah. All right, let's switch over to my screen. So I saw this question earlier, and some people reverse engineered the Apple neural hash because it was already embedded in some previous versions of iOS 14.3. So I guess this was hidden under obfuscated class names. And what the end result of this was somebody was able to extract it and make it so that you can go ahead and compile it for yourself.
Whoa.
So you can compile it on Linux, you can try it out. It's a really interesting peek into the way that Apple was trying to create this perceptual hash. And so I have not done this myself because as you can see, there is documentation, but it is long. And I don't have anything specific I'm trying to do with this, so it's not, it's not a big priority for me. But if you guys want to check this out, if you are interested in perceptual hashing, if you want to take a look at what Apple settled on for this application, which again caused like a very big stir. This is the technical summary where they go into what a neural hash is, and they kind of like explain like the difference between different things and how you can like change some aspects of the photo and it makes something different. Really the view of this and what the goal of this and what makes it so unique is that it's trying to be able to take a photo that's maybe full color, a photo that's black and white, but is still the same color, and be able to create a hash that would actually, tell someone that, hey, this is the same photo, even though it's been modified. So, the problem here is if this photo has been cropped, scaled, rotated, whatever, it makes it really difficult for a traditional hash to be able to match it accurately. So this neural hash is purporting to be able to take similar images, again, things that have been rotated, changed, swapped, whatever, and be able to come up with a unique enough signature that it can be reliably detected. Of course, the problem with this is what with hashes?
You can run into collisions, possibly.
Exactly. You can run into collisions. So as soon as this hash was released, someone went ahead and found several collisions and published them. So the point here is that, this deliberately has collisions built into it because there's going to be different perceptually similar images that are hashed and then compared using this tool. So if you want to see the way it works, then it's a really fascinating technology. Again, most people have considered it to be bad because it's part of an onboard surveillance system, basically, that allows you to search a phone for different types of content, which could easily be added to later on by a government or somebody else who has the legal right to try to do that and keep it secret. So a lot of people didn't like the implications of this, and that's why it looks like this will not be implemented anytime soon, although it's still unclear whether or not it's going to be pulled entirely. So if you're interested in the story, or if you want to try out the hash yourself, then check out this GitHub repository. I will drop the link in the chat.
That's pretty sweet.
Cool. All right. Next, let's take a question from probably the chat. Do you see any good ones?
I haven't seen any new ones since.
Well, in that case, I guess it's a good time to announce the winner from our last week's draw. So, and while I'm doing that, perhaps you could read through the questions to find one.
Cool.
So last week, we decided to announce our very first giveaway, where Hack5 has sponsored us to give one of you $100 in Hack5 gift cards. So you can proceed right over to the Hack5 store and buy lots of cool Hack5 gear with this. So we are going to announce the winner of our first contest, which if you had been on our last stream and you joined, then you would be able to possibly win one as well. But don't worry, if you didn't win this week, which, I mean, unless you're one person, then you didn't, you can enter next week by just dropping a question on the YouTube channel. And if we like your question, then we will pick it to answer and you will win a prize. So again, if you want to win $100 in Hack5 credit, you can go ahead and leave a question on the YouTube channel. And if we pick it, if it's the best question that week, then you will win $100. So who was the winner this week?
Liz Smith.
Liz Smith. So Liz Smith, if you signed up last week, then congratulations. You just won $100 in Hack5 gift cards. We will be emailing you with that. And if you want to be as lucky as Liz, then make sure to, again, leave a question for us so we can answer it on the live Q&A stream. All right, you got one?
I sure do.
All right, is this from the channel?
This one's from the channel.
Okay.
Just curious if anyone can recommend a website to help me better find a compatible Wi-Fi/Bluetooth network adapter for my desktop that will support monitor mode and packet injection. So it looks like he wants a built-in card that supports this instead of a USB dongle.
I've had good luck with just random ThinkPads, especially the one that I typically use. Which model? I'll have to remember later, but it's an old one. It came with a CD drive. That happened to have like a Bluetooth and a Wi-Fi chipset that was compatible with Kali Linux and allowed me to do a lot of interesting stuff. But off the top of my head, we typically recommend Alpha Wireless or Panda Wireless network adapters for just getting into hacking, putting your card into monitor mode, doing packet injection. Most of those wireless network adapters will work, but they also have specific segments of their website that say like Kali Linux compatible, which is really helpful if you're trying to figure out which ones will work. So for Wi-Fi, I highly recommend these. I have not done a lot of Bluetooth stuff at the moment. So do you have any recommendations for that?
I haven't either, but an important thing to note, I guess, if you're looking for a adapter card, or rather a built-in one for your computer, would be the chipset to see if it's supported for doing the things that you mentioned. So I think those would be like Realtek, MediaTek, Atheros chipsets, things like that.
Yeah.
But you can check for specs on the manufacturer's website for whether or not it's compatible with those features that you want enabled.
Cool. So we have one question from the chat, which is, how are ransomware and viruses built? Well, this is actually really cool because when we were doing a presentation for Varonis, Michael and I actually both built our own ransomware using Python. So was it good ransomware? No, it was terrible ransomware. It was only going to work on like one platform. Like it only would go after data that was like really, really obvious. It wasn't trying to get into other file shares and stuff. But basically, ransomware or malware is designed to accomplish a relatively simple function, and is trying to be as like sneaky and obfuscated and also like low and slow as possible in most cases to be able to evade detection. So like there's a core function that all malware has to accomplish in order to survive. Basically, it has to infect the target, it has to establish some sort of persistence, and then assuming that it didn't get into the place it wanted to right off the first attempt, it's going to need to move around on the network and try to spread or elevate its privileges. These are all just kind of things that any piece of malware needs to do. So anybody who's writing malware really just needs to focus on a couple specific things. And anything besides that is just extra obfuscation, extra like 0 days you might throw in to make the job easier. It's really kind of interesting how similar a lot of malware is in what it has to do in order to persist and stay alive. So, getting into looking at the way malware is written is really interesting because even as an amateur with Python, I can still write malware that would effectively encrypt everything on a computer using the same type of encryption that real malware authors do. The difference is mine would probably get caught on a corporate environment because it's not as sneaky as, or using a lot of the tricks that a lot of malware authors do in order to evade things like Windows Defender and other stuff that would be an immediate obstacle to getting your malware running. So for the purpose of testing and showing off like how defensive tools work, I've actually written my own malware. But again, it was terrible. But that just means that malware is kind of anybody can write it. And I've seen some really, really sad pieces of like ransomware or malware that like either don't fully encrypt the files or just kind of like beg for money. They're like, listen, I haven't finished this program, but it could do damage maybe. I don't know. If you could give me like $10, I'll just delete it and we'll just call this good. So, even amateurs write malware. It's not that hard to do so. And it doesn't require a lot of resources or advanced computer science degree. That being said, if you are very sophisticated and you do have great malware, then a lot of people now just shop it out and they'll franchise their malware to other people who are less skilled. So they'll write really sophisticated malware because they have lots of resources and really great people, and then they'll shop it out to people who have just enough technical knowledge to use that malware to go out and commit crimes. So there's a couple different ways that it's created. Again, you can have amateurs creating it or people with very low levels of skill where this does work, but it's maybe not great. Or you can have people who are highly skilled, who are creating excellent malware and then giving it out to people who then use it and bring them a cut of money. So that's usually the two different ways that malware is kind of created. All right, we're going to go into a dark place. We're going to go into my Twitter messages, direct messages, and specifically my message requests. So let's go ahead and switch to my screen. And this is something I like to do every so often to just see if there's any questions I actually can answer here, because most of the time when I look through this, the answer is just no to every single question. So let's see if we got anything besides no. Hello, I found your video and I'm having problems running the program. Well, that's not good because I didn't write it. I opened my terminal, navigated to hatch directory, but I'm getting an error when I type in python2 main.py. Can you help? No, I can't, because you didn't tell me what the error said. So I have no idea what's going wrong. Not only that, I did not write this program. So you're going to want to go ahead and talk to the guy that made, or lady, who made hatch. I'm just reporting the news here. All right, moving on. So we got one that was, the answer was just no. Hello, can I get a Wi-Fi password without like having a clue / word list? Been following your YouTube content. If I can get an InfoSec certificate, thanks on you. Cool. No. So if you don't have like a word, well, so you do need a clue. So I'm going to go with still no. But if you have a clue, then you could use a tool like Airgeddon to exploit like the WPS setup pin. And in that case, you would be able to get a Wi-Fi password without having a password list. But again, you would still need a clue. So I'm going to go with no on this. But the core of this question is sort of a yes.
What
if
about
you are
their InfoSec certificate, Cody?
There's lots of them, and good on you if you get one. And thank you for the message. This is actually a good question. I like it. But you still do need a clue. So I'm sorry. The clue is necessary. All right, next up. How do I deploy social fish across a network? Hi, can I get a link to your full hacking course? No and yes. So unfortunately, I think that they're talking about the Null Byte course. So after we left Null Byte, they put up like some random class on like master class of ethical hacking. We had nothing to do with that. They didn't ask us. It's not us. We are not performing in it. It's just like some other stuff. So we don't have the ability to get you free access to that. We don't sign off on it. I've never watched it actually, because again, this is after we left Null Byte. So unfortunately, the full hacking course is no. But if you do want to just take the Udemy classes we have, you can always go to hack.gay and you'll find the links there. But yes, how to deploy social fish across the network. Social fish is a tool used for phishing social media sites, as you might imagine. And seeing as I did not write this tool, I do not know the answer to this, nor am I too enthused to respond, just because phishing social media is typically not a very professional thing to do. It's usually not related to like pen testing. It's usually more related to like my girlfriend's acting suspicious lately. So I'm not going to answer this one. So we got another no. This one is, hello Cody, hope you're doing well. Sorry if I bothered you. You didn't. But I want to know how I can get access to a computer from the same network and get a file from it using Android Kali Linux. Well, first, if you know how to run Kali Linux on Android, I mean, aside from NetHunter, let me know, because that sounds interesting. But I have not gotten NetHunter working, despite Zam's best efforts. Thank you, Zam. So in this case, you would have to exploit or steal, I don't know. Like, so one of these things that happens pretty often is I get asked an exceedingly specific question for a situation I don't have enough information on. So like, I don't know what operating system this computer is. I don't know if like you're authorized to do this. I don't know like what sort of defenses are on the computer. I don't know when it's been updated. I don't know what tools you have. There's so much I don't know here. So how do you get access to a computer to get a file? Walk up to it and type in the password. I don't know. Like for this one, again, I'm gonna go with I don't know. So there we go. 4 for 4. No.
Nice.
This is why I don't go into my message request, but I do go in occasionally. So if you want to ask me a question, this is by far the worst way to do it. If you want to ask us a question and possibly win a prize, then please do it on our YouTube channel, because I actually checked that and it is not cursed. Hey, why did you leave Null Byte? That's a great question. So the reason why I left Null Byte is they stopped paying me. Apparently the company that owned Null Byte, Wonder How To, wanted to sell it. So at a certain point, while they were trying to go off and sell it, they just stopped paying everyone. So we moved on and negotiated a contract with Hack5 because we'd been working with them before and we really like them. They also really like us. So we just brought our whole act over to Hack5 because nobody likes to not get paid for like 8 months. So it was kind of crazy because we had stacked so many episodes for them that like I could have been hit by like a bus and nobody would have known for like 8 or 9 months. We literally had probably like 25, 30, maybe more episodes all stacked. So when they kind of like stopped paying and then decided they weren't going to be active anymore, the videos just kept rolling out for months. So it kind of looked like Null Byte was still active for like a really long time, but that was just because we created so much video content that they could just keep rolling it out for a long time. So by the time we started working on Hack5, doing our now weekly show there, yeah, we'd already been working with Hack5 for a good amount of time and we hadn't been working with Null Byte for quite a while. But yeah, I kind of miss Null Byte because they really let us do what we wanted. And we also had a really excellent editor over there named Justin who really kept the whole website together. If you guys think of Null Byte, you're actually secretly thinking of Justin, who's the editor who kept everything running and introduced like all of our new people to how to write, approved all of our topics. Like Justin was really like the person who kept all that together. So big shout out to Justin for making Null Byte what all of you know it to be for such a long time. Still don't know what's going to happen with it. I think somebody might buy it at some point and then maybe Null Byte will come back again. But yeah, no idea what's going on over there. So it was a good time. But now if you want to see basically the same content, you can just check out Hackbyte on Hack5, where people like Alex are presenting on the same kind of topics we covered on Null Byte every week.
We have another question. Is WPA3 really any better than WPA2? I use it on my Wi-Fi 6 router, but some of my devices are unable to connect to Wi-Fi 6, so I pick security over anything. But is it really that much better? I understand like a good quarter of that question.
I understand all of it, so it's good.
Cool.
Also, yes, Vincent, we are taking questions from the chat. Feel free to drop yours. But so the reason why WPA3 is better is because it, by its nature, blocks a lot of the really obnoxious attacks that are possible in WPA2. That means some things like abusing beacon frames or abusing deauthentication or disassociation packets are just not possible because in WPA3, these packets are authenticated. You can't just spoof them the way that it's easy to do with WPA2. Now, does that mean it's perfect? No. My friend Matthew Van Hoff has found several different vulnerabilities in WPA3, some of which are pretty severe or do allow some of the same kind of attacks to be done against WPA3 that you can do against WPA2. The other problem is that most access points are going to be dual or hybrid, WPA2, WPA3, because some devices won't support WPA3 for quite some time. So it's really easy to just downgrade to WPA2 and attack that on most of these access points that support both. It just means that if there's a big barrier and a little barrier and you can downgrade to the little barrier, most people are just going to do that because there's so many tools out there already for attacking WPA2. So I would say if you can switch to WPA3, switch to it. You're going to see a dramatically reduced attack surface, and you're going to make it a lot harder for attackers to actually go after your network. I know, because if I'm faced with the WPA3 network, I have a lot fewer options than I do when working with a WPA2 network. So definitely it's worth upgrading, even though it is not perfect and there are a couple of exploits. None of them are anywhere near as severe as the problems that are already baked into WPA2. So I definitely recommend updating, and I think that you will find there's really nothing wrong with WPA3. It's just like, people wanted it to be perfect, and it's not perfect. So there are some complaints with the fact that there are a couple problems with it that can be exploited under certain circumstances. All right.
We have a good question. Why don't you buy the Null Byte?
Hey, that's a great question. They wanted $500,000. Too rich for my blood. If you guys want to put together like a Null Byte fund and just all buy Null Byte, I think the price has probably gone down. So yeah, if you guys want to go ahead and buy a Null Byte, I'll keep doing it if you're a nice boss, So at the moment, I think it is for sale if you guys want to hit them up. But too rich for my blood, and frankly, like, in order to start anew, sometimes you have to just burn things down and start from scratch. I'm not saying that like being on Hack5 is starting from scratch. They're already a really big channel, but starting Null Byte from scratch and getting it to like 700,000 subscribers before everything happened was an incredible experience. We learned a lot from it, and we really made that show a good community for beginners, and I think we can do the same on Hack5. So I don't know. I'm not too upset about it. It is it's like years of my work that's all kind of up in the air, and no one really knows what's going to happen to it. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it, because I mostly just constantly had panic attacks. That's why I don't blink.
Question from Ashley. Should I buy Raspberry Pi 4 gigabytes or 8 gigabytes? Will it support me for bug bounty?
It depends on what you're using it for, obviously, is going to be my default response to most things. But I would say if you're going to, for a Raspberry Pi, the difference is pretty negligible in terms of price. I would say get the slightly nicer one, especially if you're going to be using it for a bunch of projects. There's lots of stuff you can do with the Raspberry Pi, and kind of the point of it is, it's just enough punch to get the job done without really being able to do anything else. So you're already kind of skimming on like the bare minimum of what you're going to need for a lot of projects. If you can boost that a little bit, then you'll probably be happier. But frankly, it's really not going to cause that much of an issue for most projects that you're doing, unless you're really looking to get into something that's a bit more, intense.
Any recommendations for prefabricated batteries for the Raspberry Pi 4?
I'm going to give that one to you.
They do sell like hat modules that manage as like UPS type things that manage battery power for you. I'm not sure about any specific ones in general. Or wait, that doesn't make sense. I'm not sure about any specific like platforms that would allow you to host battery power for the Raspberry Pi 4, but you can look into that for like LiPo batteries or something like that.
One question is, how can I convince my employer to buy Hack5 gear for me? I do work in security. Well, that's a good question. One is you could just ask a really good question on our stream, and you might just get $100 worth of Hack5 gear anyway.
Yeah.
No convincing required. But if you don't want to do that, or if you don't win, then my recommendation would be finding something that is immediately applicable to your work environment that you can demonstrate, and just be like, this is an educational tool where I can show you visibly some of the problems here without needing to take 10 minutes of your time to explain, or 20 minutes or whatever. Often Hack5 tools are really good for showing off vulnerabilities in a kind of a spectacular way that makes people be like, oh, we need to fix this. So that would be my recommendation. Hopefully there will be some more videos coming out on Hack5 gear and Hack5 payloads in the future, which will make it, maybe a little bit easier to sell this sort of thing when people see all the great stuff that it is capable of doing. So yeah, we'll try to get on that as well to make that that conversation a little bit easy for you.
Gonna take a question from one of our videos.
Cool.
I'm sure it's more than possible, but could someone turn a USB network adapter into like a beefed up USB rubber ducky, but at the same time let the adapter itself function as a regular USB network adapter?
You were talking about the Bash Bunny. That I believe that is exactly what the Bash Bunny does. So yes, please see the Bash Bunny, because I think that is, if I had to describe the Bash Bunny, that is more or less how I would describe it.
Does the new one has networking stuff, right? Can it
Yeah,
be
it has
wireless?
Bluetooth.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so the new Bash Bunny actually has Bluetooth. You can like trigger it via Bluetooth, which I think is super, super cool. So yeah, I think you're just talking about the Bash Bunny. So yes, the Bash Bunny.
Nice. In terms of like combining network adapter or Wi-Fi reconnaissance stuff with like the rubber ducky, there's also like the Wi-Fi duck platform that we took a look at, which sort of addresses that.
This is true. So one platform I really like is the Wi-Fi duck, which I just happen to be holding in my hand right now for no reason. The Wi-Fi duck is an ESP8266 plus a SparkFun Pro Micro soldered together onto a little PCB. And what it does is it creates a human interface device that can pretend to be any sort of USB device, like a keyboard or a mouse or whatever. And it also has a Wi-Fi interface, so you can inject keystrokes in real time. Or you can pick a pre-saved payload that's already on it. So if I wanted to write a payload for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, and then I just saw a computer at the coffee shop, I plug this in really quickly, and then I access the web page that it generated and press the button for the right payload, I could exploit theoretically any operating system I want to, because I can pick the payload after I decide on what the target's going to be. So it's a really cool way of making the USB rubber ducky like a little bit more flexible for engagements, with an interesting open source project using very, very commonly available and very cheap microcontrollers. So I really like the Wi-Fi duck. It's a cool project, and that might be what you're talking about.
I dropped a link to it in the chat if you guys are interested in checking one out.
Yes.
We have another question. Is there a way to load balance with Wi-Fi adapters? Sort of. There's like that one project. What was that crazy Wi-Fi pineapple stack that was able to do reconnaissance on like every channel simultaneously?
Oh my god.
Oh, the Wi-Fi cactus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like, correct me if this is wrong, but like the way, if you have like a single Wi-Fi adapter, the way it works is it'll do channel hopping because it can't like watch on every channel at the same time. So there's projects like the Wi-Fi cactus that have enough Wi-Fi radios that it's able to monitor and gather reconnaissance on every single channel simultaneously. So I guess that sort of answers that question.
So yeah, and there are some networking style things with that, and Michael's so desperate to answer, but unfortunately he's on a expedition, so he can't. So perhaps Michael can answer that for you in more detail, because it's pfSense related. I suspect what you were talking about. You're asking about how to do like load balancing for a Wi-Fi network that you're trying to use, not necessarily like sniff. But and Michael's like nodding vehemently because he's full of information he wants to share with you. Perhaps he can type it out in the chat. But yeah, so unfortunately, I'm not the networking person at the house. How do hackers find new vulnerabilities in software that after some time become a CVE? So the life cycle of this is typically someone is reverse engineering or fuzzing, or what's fuzzing, by the way?
Not entirely sure.
Fuzzing is when you send a bunch of random input to a device and try to see if something you send can cause it to crash. So a fuzzer is typically something that's designed to send a lot of really randomized input to something. It could be a microcontroller, a program, an input, a web form, anything. And it's designed to try to crash it or look for interesting crashes that could lead to exploitation. Now, typically, if you find something that crashes a program, especially if it crashes it in a certain way, you might have a viable way of abusing the program to do something even worse. And that's where a lot of these sorts of bugs initially are found. Like somebody finds an interesting crash, that crash allows them to do something that they're not supposed to be able to do, and thus we have a bug. Now that bug can go on to be weaponized and become an exploit. And the exploit is really what we're talking about when we're talking about like the reason why you need to update your Apple device. Groups like the NSO group will then take these bugs, they'll weaponize the exploit to the point that it's part of a whole delivery system and ecosystem, and that's when we get emergency security updates like the one that we got yesterday. So the anatomy of how a bug goes from being a crash all the way up to being a fully weaponized exploit that's used against, activists is really, really interesting. But that's basically kind of usually how it works. Like once a program is found to do something outside of what it's supposed to do, how serious that is depends on what you can get away with abusing that flaw in the program. For everybody talking about vulnerabilities and bug bounties, just check out crowdsourced bug bounty program like HackerOne. You most likely won't get a bug bounty payout or CVE, but you'll learn something. They have introductory courses when you make an account. That's actually an excellent suggestion. I really like BugCrowd and Hackeroni, one of their competitors. Some people call them HackerOne. But in general, like if you want to get started on learning how to look for these sorts of vulnerabilities, they have excellent educational material. They make it really easy for you to start learning. And I really like them because for people who are just trying to make some money on the side or just learn how this sort of stuff works so they can apply it and start to learn more about maybe getting a job doing this, it's a great starting point with very low pressure and anybody can get started doing it. So I really recommend Hackeroni or HackerOne, sorry, or what's the other one? BugCrowd. Oh my gosh, I just totally blanked on it for a second. But yeah, either one of those would be a good place to start. I like the name of Hackeroni, But BugCrowd has honestly been like a little bit more, I guess like proactive in creating a lot of resources for people who don't really know anything about this sort of thing, but do want to get started and want to start from scratch. So I appreciate good resources wherever they are, and I think BugCrowd does a really good job with that. Sorry for completely forgetting your company name for a minute.
From Firesnake, hey Cody, are you down for the next few years? I'm about to buy the Null Byte. If you down, I will do that.
I mean, yeah, if you guys want to buy Null Byte, we'll do it, Like, just be a good boss, Well, because otherwise we'll walk away. We got an attitude. But, yeah, no, like, if you guys want to buy Null Byte, do it. Do it. I dare you. That would be hilarious. That would be very funny to me if somebody bought Null Byte. You snooze, you lose. Somebody wants to sneak in and grab it. We'll make a couple episodes. We just got to negotiate pay. How much are you going to pay us for the episodes? All right, so, but yeah, we'll do it. We don't care. What do you think is the best way for a regular user to protect their home network? I think the best way for a user to protect their home network, aside from all the stuff that everyone's going to tell you, like set a strong password, maybe upgrade to WPA3, is probably to do some sort of monitoring. When a new device connects to your network, if you have no idea, that could be a surprise you don't like down the line. If that was somebody who was doing something nefarious or did not have access to the network or was connecting to other devices on the network to do something bad, I think it's really worthwhile to have some sort of network monitoring, and even something like Thing, Network Scanner, where you can just occasionally scan and make sure that there's nothing on your network that isn't supposed to be, is a good idea. If you're more paranoid, you can also run something like Kismet. Kismet will generate alerts and will tell you when devices are acting suspiciously in your area. This can also just make you paranoid, because sometimes devices will do like normal device stuff and Kismet will be like, that could be suspicious, it could be doing something bad, I'm not sure, but maybe. And that's enough to make the average layperson be like, I am under attack, I'm targeted, everybody's targeting me, what is going on, why am I so targeted? Like Kismet can make you a little paranoid if you think that every alert is legit and targeted towards you. There could be some things like a device will change the name that it's putting out but keep the same MAC address, and Kismet will go crazy and be like, this device is spoofing, it's bad, it's doing spoofing stuff, I know this device is up to something. And like it could just be someone could just change their Wi-Fi network name or just change their hotspot name, and Kismet will freak out and start saying that there's suspicious behavior. So you kind of do need to know what these alerts mean when you set up network monitoring, if that's something you want to do. If you're just like an average person, you don't care about threats down the block being blasted across your screen in like large text, then like, maybe just run Thing occasionally and make sure that you recognize everything that's on your network. But if you're having network problems and you do want to pop up Kismet, then just, look up what the alerts mean. Don't immediately assume that you're under attack, because I've done this a couple times. Actually, my worst experience was I set up Kismet to monitor my network, and then I had plugged in a Wi-Fi pineapple without knowing it. So Kismet started freaking out and telling me that all these attacks were underway, and it was legit. There were actually attacks underway. I was recognizing, in particular, the Karma attack, which means that there were devices around me that had been connected to an old Wi-Fi network and were still calling out for them. And somebody in the area was spoofing those long dead Wi-Fi networks in an attempt to try to get those devices to try to connect to them. And I was like, what is going on? And of course, it was just a Wi-Fi pineapple that was plugged in doing its thing. So again, these can make you a little bit paranoid if you plug in like an IDS or something and then don't know what all the alerts mean. So I don't want to give you guys too much. I want to give you enough options to know if you are under attack, but I don't want to make you crazy. So Kismet is not for everyone.
Should I make Raspberry Pi my second system? What do
I
you think
would.
about this?
I would. So personally, I use a Raspberry Pi as like a mobile system or as something to experiment on, because if I have to take out the SD card and put it in a microwave, it doesn't matter. Like it's not the same thing as having to destroy like my precious PC that I built and now infected with a piece of, experimental security software I downloaded off the internet. So Raspberry Pis are generally pretty like disposable, and that's why I like them. They're just powerful enough to do their jobs, but they're not expensive enough to really get super attached to if something bad were to happen to it. So there are some disadvantages with the Raspberry Pi, such as that SD card I mentioned. If you power off the Raspberry Pi incorrectly, it's extremely likely that it will corrupt the SD card and you will have to start from scratch. That can be super inconvenient if you're out in the field somewhere and you manage to fry your SD card and need to reformat it. So I would say the primary disadvantage to using a Raspberry Pi as your second system would be just like frying it by accident. It is really annoying to recover the SD card. You have to FS check it on another Linux system if you want to recover the data on it. So if you were doing something that you need to recover, this can be a disadvantage to using the Raspberry Pi as a on-the-go hacking system. But I do really like it. I do use it myself for a lot of different stuff, so I would recommend it. What about you?
Oh, definitely. I mostly use it as just like a tool I can quickly pop up as like a disposable Linux box. I was gonna do a video on like how to quickly set up a headless Raspberry Pi for doing stuff like Wi-Fi reconnaissance, stuff like that. But it mostly depends on your use case and what application you're gonna be using it for.
So Zam also pointed out, for the average user, turning off WPS is a really, really good idea. Do you know why?
Probably because it's like easy to exploit-ish. I'm not
Yes,
sure.
it is. So WPS, or wireless protected setup, is something that allows you to, let's say you're a very old person and you forget your password, and you also forget the fact that you could just reset the router. So instead of just doing like any of the normal person stuff you would do, you can use a code that's printed on the router to log back in and have it basically dump the password and immediately give it to you. But there's a vulnerability in the way that a lot of different routers will actually secure this pin. So there's like 3 different ways of breaking in and getting this pin. The most basic way is called Reaver, where you can just brute force the pin over time. If some protections have been implemented, then there's another way of getting this where, I guess it's more like 2. There's another way of getting this where some routers will use bad randomization in the encryption that they try to use to protect this pin when you are doing an initial request. And what that means is because the router is essentially picking something like the number 0 as a random seed for all this encryption, it's trivial to decrypt the message and be able to find out the pin and then just submit it and get the password. This process takes about 15 seconds when it's exploited by software. So if you want to avoid a really easy access into your network from a single setting that could be vulnerable, and often when this is released to like internet service providers, then it's possible for lots of people to have this vulnerability enabled and on by default on lots of different routers. So I've seen areas where the success rate will be like 1 in 4 routers will be vulnerable to this sort of exploit. So make sure that you secure your routers by disabling WPS setup pin. It's probably the easiest way for hackers to break into your Wi-Fi network. But yeah, that would be my advice. Of course, if you have, I actually don't know if there's any instance of WPA3 with vulnerable WPS setup pin. That would be really interesting if you upgraded WPA3 and kept WPS on and it was still that easy to access.
That would really suck.
I have to believe that they fixed that by now, but it could be not.
Is it possible to boot from USB on Raspberry Pi? I've tried it and it's pretty damn hard.
It is
I
possible.
failed.
It is possible. You need to do some switching around with what it looks for on boot, which means going into the configuration file and changing it from reading from the SD to a USB stick. I've done it. It's not that hard.
I tried like 4 years ago on a really old version of the Raspberry Pi. So
yeah, so there's some things that make it easier. One of them is a program, which I'm blanking on the name, but I'm sure I'll remember it, that allows you to boot any one of like multiple different Raspberry Pi images that you store on a USB stick. So you have the USB stick that you plug in. It has maybe 5 different operating systems. You could have Kali Linux, you could have Ubuntu, Raspbian, all this, or I think it's Raspberry Pi OS now. But you could choose which one you want to run as soon as you boot up the Raspberry Pi. I think it's called Berry Boot, now that I think of it. Yeah, so Berry Boot is one way that you could boot from a USB stick and also be able to pick from a huge number of different operating systems, depending on which one you want to run. So I really like Berry Boot. I think it's cool, and that's an example of a setup with the Raspberry Pi to be able to boot from a USB stick. Although technically it's booting from the SD card and then switching over to the USB stick, but hey, I mean, it works, so let's not complain. One question is, what are some good projects to do on a Raspberry Pi if you've never worked with one before? My favorite project on the Raspberry Pi is still short-range hijacking of FM radio. I still think that's the absolute coolest project. So just using a pin on a Raspberry Pi, you can actually create FM radio signals, and you can take over radio transmitters. And by that I mean the signal's just slightly stronger than the actual real signal of devices within a couple feet. Now, if you were to be illegal and add a slightly longer wire antenna to the Raspberry Pi, then this range would extend to a lot further, like maybe about a city block. Now, you should not do this without a filter because it's also broadcasting on lots of other frequencies because this is creating unfiltered radio. But frankly, it's pretty amazing that this works. And if you do it only with the pin on the Raspberry Pi without adding antenna, promise not to do that, then it should be legal because it's only going to be able to be received within like a couple feet or so. Again, you can basically take a radio signal that's coming in and then broadcast over it. So you can play any audio file you want. And I used to do this to play one of those like warnings like signals that says that there's a disaster, and then like play out a recording that like North Korea had like launched missiles. And if you've ever been in like a laundry mat that has just the radio playing, you can kind of imagine what the potential for that would be. Not that I would ever do this sort of thing, but it is really interesting to know that with the Raspberry Pi and literally nothing else, you're able to use software to make it broadcast radio signals. That's probably my favorite Raspberry Pi project. What about you?
It's been a while since I've worked with the Raspberry Pi. That one was pretty interesting, and I was hoping to cover that in a Hack5 video or something. I'm actually not sure off the top of my head, but I'll think of a good one for next time.
What, you can't think of one Raspberry Pi project? Name one Raspberry Pi project that's good.
Pi hole.
You cheated. Okay, I'm gonna say the Pirate Box is another really good project for the Raspberry Pi that allows you to create an access point that has a web interface, a file server, a chat. I would say the Pi, not the Pi hole. Nobody likes the Pi hole. No, the Pirate Box is probably one of my favorite projects. I think it's really, really cool. So, and it has a lot of different applications for both like sneaky stuff if you wanted to create like a dead drop, or in like a disaster or somewhere where there was limited ability to get a connection. You could exchange data, upload data, share data, and it to me it seems like a really good and useful kind of tool to use with Raspberry Pi. So we have a repeat question. Can you intercept confidential signals from satellites? Just curious. So confidential, I'm assuming you mean like encrypted or otherwise hidden, because there's lots of different satellite signals you can intercept just from putting up the right antenna and being able to like draw down like pictures of like the Earth, for example, from like a NOAA satellite. When you have satellite signals that are encrypted, that becomes a lot harder because now you're breaking encryption. And while there are some like workarounds to this sort of thing, like I personally don't know of any really good ones that would be applicable for beginners. So breaking satellite encryption, no, I don't know of any satellite encryption that I can break just like right off the bat. I know about encoding that you can read, but not about encryption you can break, unfortunately. But if anybody else does, please let me know. Then again, I don't specialize in like satellite communication, so I would be like not the last one to know, but amongst the last ones to know. So yeah.
Is it good to start? Is it good to start with the Raspberry Pi Pico?
We don't have one yet, and the reason that we don't is because it doesn't offer Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, as far as I'm aware, which is a major thing that we work on a lot. So the lack of wireless connectivity really limits what we personally can do with it. We still think it's cool. It seems like a really interesting project. It seems like you can do like human interface device things with it, and maybe some other stuff. But like, I think the ESP32S2 is cooler. So, it's okay. But I'm honestly looking forward to other microcontrollers being delivered later this month a lot more than I am the Raspberry Pi Pico. But show me a good project. I'll try it. Like, I'm just, for somebody who focuses on Wi-Fi and connectivity, like having a microcontroller with no Wi-Fi or connectivity is not very exciting to me. So,
Yeah, it's a bit underwhelming with the features that it comes with. I wish I had Wi-Fi. That would be way cooler.
yes. I wish it had Wi-Fi almost as much as I wish that the Raspberry Pi 400 had a trackpad. So let's see. Another question was, well, actually more of a statement. It was just that something that I missed was OpenWRT on a Raspberry Pi is really cool. The reason it's really cool also is it supports WPA3. So
Whoa.
if you wanted to try out WPA3 and start hacking around with it or trying it out, then you could do that on a Raspberry Pi that's running OpenWRT, which is really, really interesting. So, okay, I think that that's just about all the time we have for questions today. If, again, you want to win $100 of Hack5 merch, then make sure that you leave a question on the YouTube channel, because every week we will be picking a winner from basically the best question. So if you've got a good question, you could win $100 worth of Hack5 gear as well, just like our winner this week. So thank you to everybody in the chat for also asking questions, and we will see you all next week. Alex?
Thank you for having me. See you guys later.
Bye.